conversation go with my friend. We're in this
Sophia, welcome to Keep the Conversation Going. It has been way too long since you and I have connected, but I'm reminded instantly seeing your smile and your vivacious attitude of how much I've missed interacting with you. So welcome to the show. I have with me today Sophia Ononye-Onyia, and her accolades are too many to list. So I will just simply start by saying hello and welcome, and how are you?
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Before I even tell you how I'm doing, I have to start by saying this. I'm so glad I met you. I think that as a professor, as my professor in communications back in business school, you really helped me to get comfortable with the art of communication. And that was a very significant step for me in sort of discovering or rather unraveling my passion for scientific storytelling. So you should know that you made a mark, and it's an important mark because you push people to be better, but you do it in such a way that is natural. And I can never forget the impact you made in my professional development. So I just want to start by saying that.
Wow, I'm humbled because when we get into this conversation, so for folks who don't know Sophia, that's a pretty big compliment because you have accomplished many things in your relatively young life, and we're going to dive into some of those. I take that compliment very profoundly from you, and I appreciate it. And let's not wait 5 years till we have another great conversation. Okay, so that's number one. But let's talk about this. So for some of the folks in the Keep the Conversation Going audience, they probably don't know maybe who Sophia is yet, but they will by the time that they're finished watching that. So you want to just give us, a snippet of what you've been doing and where you come from and what's next for you?
Okay. Yeah. And first of all, it's a great Wednesday. So thank you for asking me how I'm doing. So happy Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. I don't know what day it is anymore. I just know it's a happy day. And I was born in Nigeria. I came to the US 18 years ago. And my singular passion in life has been about healthcare, about life sciences. And even though I didn't articulate it as elegantly as I do today, I think from maybe the time I was 5 or 6, I knew that my mission in life was to amplify scientific innovation. And so when I came to the US, it was more because of the challenges and the environment where I was born. It wasn't very easy for many women to, get a foot forward or to pursue the sciences. Why would you want to be a scientist? That is too hard, I was told. But I did it anyway. And I spent 5 years living in Ohio, where I got my bachelor's degree in biochemistry. I got a master's degree in public health. And I was fortunate to get my first job working at Pfizer down in Groton, Connecticut. So I moved and I worked as a scientist for about a year and a half. And the Pfizer team was great. I just didn't have enough education. At least that's what I told myself. So I went to UConn, go UConn, and I got my PhD in medicinal chemistry. And afterwards, I went to Yale University and I did a postdoctoral training in breast medical oncology research. And just a little bit about my time at UConn is very important because my first time was as a PhD student doing cancer research. And my second time could not be any more different. It was when I got my MBA, and that's obviously where I met you. And the MBA was a turning point for me because I realized what my value proposition was. It was the ability to articulate the clinical and economic value of a drug to a diverse audience that really sort of ignited my strategy consulting career. And I spent 5 years living in different parts of the country, traveling to different parts of the world, just going with this little mission of mine while partnering with great companies, quite frankly. And last year was, again, another turning point for me. And this was pre-COVID. And what I wanted to do was to own my own shop. I wanted to drive my own agenda. I knew entrepreneurship was going to be very difficult, but I get fascinated by challenges. It's just something new to do. So I launched the Sophia Consulting Firm last year. And it took me on this journey of self-discovery, and as you mentioned earlier, sort of putting yourself out there so that people get to know who you are and what phase of your journey. And I've been blown away by the amount of support that I've received so far for this entrepreneurial journey. And I'll go into the details about what my company does later on. But, in short, it's a life science consulting firm with a focus on communications.
Unbelievable. I mean, you are in many ways. I mean, you're an inspiration to so many of us, particularly, young women in this country, and for those who want to immigrate to America and find their own journey. I'm really curious. So I've been interested in studying leadership stories and how we tell our stories about our path and about our journey. And in many ways, they become these self-fulfilling prophecies. So when we tell stories about who we are, we tend to kind of then attract those end results. And I want to ask you something. So coming from Nigeria, do you feel as if that the juxtaposition between your Nigerian background and living in America, was that what helped you uncover to say, my real calling is my ability to take the information that I'm so capable of synthesizing that others may not be, and I can help translate it to them in a way? Was that a part of your journey? And when you tell your leadership story, how big of a role does that play for you?
That's a very important question. I think for me, the core of who I am, obviously, is being born in a different country, in a place where things were very difficult. And to get out of there was probably what helped me to become comfortable with navigating challenges. I think that science in itself, STEM as a field, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, it's a difficult field to make easy for other people to understand, but it's something that absolutely fascinated me. And so it's like you have this toy and you want everybody else to see how great your toy is. And they're like, well, I don't understand this toy. And I recognize that my leadership journey, what made me unique in many ways was that ability to break down science, but the tenacity, the determination, the ability to work through difficult situations was absolutely born with the fact that I was born in a different country and coming to the US. What I liked about my time here, or what I've liked so far about my time here, is that it really is a story of hope and optimism, really that American dream that if you want it and you work hard enough, you will get it. But I also had to learn there was one secret sauce. And I'm fascinated by television shows, Bloomberg TV, ESPN, like you'll be amazed at the things that I watch. But it was always about passion for people. It was always about people that found a way to take things and be proud of it and to embrace it. And so when COVID hit, I started asking myself, what am I really passionate about? And that secret sauce is building relationships with people. And if you can do that, I think that's what makes leadership interesting. That you can build lasting relationships. You can meet people for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 years, however long, and they remember you. But the ingredient for me was, how do you make them remember you for something unique? And so that's something unique for me was a scientific storytelling. And for that to come from a woman, and a woman from Africa to begin with, is probably what makes it even more interesting. But I know that there are not a lot of people that do what I do, and that's because they don't have a lot of people to look up to. And I didn't really have anyone to look up to, but I had that inner drive, that inner resilience to still push through. And so my story is about telling that story in a way that I hope is inspiring and can uplift others, because that's really what a leader should do, uplift and be memorable.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. I'm interested because we share a number of common interests, right? I have been trying to work and to coach and consult folks to essentially just tell their story in effective fashion. And one of the things that's fascinating to me and that we've been really doing a lot of work on, and on my side of things, is trying to help scientists become better storytellers. Your innovation is only as good as the story that is told about it. And one of the things that we know about science is that it should, of course, always remain objective. But when we remove the scientific journey and the scientific story, I think that story ultimately loses a little bit of its attraction, a little bit of its narrative drama, if you will. You talked about secret sauce, so maybe you'll be willing to share a little bit of this with us. I'm personally curious. Have you figured out a formula, or at least have you kind of uncovered, when you look at a scientific innovation, when you talk to many of the unbelievable scientists that have been on your podcast, and we're going to get into that in a second, have you figured out like what works for you to help translate their findings into something that people can understand? Like, what is it for you? You talked about your perspective, right? You talked about being an immigrant. You talked about being a woman.
Yeah.
Are those the factors? Is that actually what helps you make it more approachable for others? Because we're all trying to kind of, I think, solve, if you're in the scientific communication world, we're trying to solve the same question.
Yeah, I think those things play a part, but I would also say that science is something that comes a bit naturally to me, intuitively, innately. And I think it's because of that simple fact that I really get it. And because I spent many years, there must be something very unique about doing cancer research. And the fact that I spent 12, 13 years as a young woman just in the lab, growing cancer cells, trying to figure out what types of drugs that it takes to kill those cancer cells. I think that having that hands-on experience with the lab allows me to connect with scientists in a way that is natural. And so when I see the podcast, when I hear feedback from people that have seen the podcast, especially non-scientists, I think they're always surprised by how natural the conversations are. They think it's going to be about, sort of very technical jargon. But if I did that, then it will be counterintuitive to the problem I'm trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about these conversations that you're having. So the Sophia Consulting Firm, right?
Yeah.
And we had some brief conversations leading up to today's conversation. And one of the things that I think we share in common right now is taking this entrepreneurial leap and the anxiety, the fear, the celebration, the joy, everything that comes with that. I want to talk to you about something because I think when we first met, one of the things that we had in common was that we were very much grounded. I think our background and the places that we came from said, look, go out there, work hard. Don't spend a lot of time talking about yourself. And if you do the right thing, good things will happen. And yet, here we are. We're in a COVID world. We've now both decided that we want to do interview and conversational shows. We're sharing content in ways that we never had before. I want to know, how has that journey been for you? Has it been scary? Has it been fun? I mean, where do you think about when you post stuff? Do you ever think about your family and what they're going to think? Do you think about your friends? And so how does that all play into Sophia, the person, and tell me all about that.
Yeah, I think there are two important turning points for me. Entrepreneurship always starts out with rapid excitement, quickly replaced by fear, and then anxiety, sleepless nights, worry. Am I good enough? Is my product or service good enough? Are people still gonna like me? The last part stopped bothering me a long time ago because it wasn't so much about likability. If it was, I wouldn't be a scientist. I would do something that is a bit more relatable. And the other things I like, I like music. I cannot sing very well, but I like music. But I think that two important things for me. When COVID hit, I worried like everyone else how I can sustain a business that I literally just started. And so I had to think about a different way to add value to my clients. And I also started to think about ways to continue relationships that I had developed. And I think I have close to 12,000 or so connections on LinkedIn. And most of those connections happened in the past year. So how do you sustain those relationships? And so that's how the podcast came about, the Amplifying Scientific Innovation podcast. And I was like, well, who am I going to talk to? I was like, well, talk to all the people you know first. And that was the first layer. And then approach the people that you don't know afterwards. And that's the second season. I have, very prominent senior leaders in the field. But I think, again, I keep the commonality about keeping those conversations natural. So that was a big turning point for me. The part where I worried about what my family will think was when I published an Inc. article. And that Inc. article probably got more views than anything else I've done so far. But because it was very personal, it was about my struggles from Nigeria to today, that transition from being an entrepreneur from being a scientist to being an entrepreneur, and just coming from a place where support was something that was rarely given to me because I wasn't really understood. I didn't really fit a box. And so I said, am I going to do this? Am I actually going to stay to Inc. publish this piece? Because they always come back to you that very last minute. Are you sure? Are you ready to go? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I waited to see what my mother would think and what my oldest brother Valentine would think. I don't know why, for both of them are sort of like a barometer. And of course, my husband is always very supportive. So I didn't have to worry too much about him. But my mom texted me and called me. He's like, oh, whoa, that was great. Very well written. And my brother was like, yes, this is the truth. People should know it. And I'm like, okay, I think we're okay now. So I don't worry too much about that. I think that where I am, because I produce a lot of content and communications, press releases for client partners, social media content for them. I write articles for MIT, for Inc., and all that good stuff. At some point, what people think about me personally is not so important. Now, professionally, what you think about the work, if it's not meeting the sort of the need, then it becomes problematic. But because I have these outlets, like again, the MIT Tech Review being one of them, if they can publish your work, it's almost like a vote of confidence. Yes, you're doing it right. Am I different today probably than before? Absolutely. And we could get into that or not, but I think that those are growing pains, and that people that might feel like they cannot relate to you anymore, you're different. But fundamentally, I'm always going to be Sophia inside of myself. I will evolve as time goes by. I will finesse different things about me. For example, one of the things you taught me, it was to limit the use of verbal fillers like and ooh and ah, and you learn those things and you get better with time. But it comes at a price. And the price for many entrepreneurs is it's loneliness. But I think the loneliness for me, I don't feel it, because I don't call it loneliness. I call it like focus. It allows you to focus a little bit because you don't fit that square. You don't fit the square so much anymore.
I think what's great is I hear somebody speaking from a place where that burden has been lifted because they are now truly exactly where they were always meant to be. And I think that when we look at life as saying we're always meant to be in this place, you're always going to be comfortable. And it really is a great feeling. As an entrepreneur, it can be sometimes really overwhelming because you want to also make the people proud who gave you the opportunity. So everybody who put you in a position to be successful, I think I've lived my life feeling indebted to every school teacher, every coach, every person who ever said, you can do it, Rory, or gave me critical feedback, right? Yeah. That you put that chip on your shoulder and you said, okay, I'm going to take that into consideration. You feel indebted to them, but it's a great thing to be able to use your skill, and you're going to do it in a way that not only you're going to connect people, you're going to help them understand scientific innovations. You are going to also help the scientists on the end of these innovations understand that their story and ability to communicate is at the forefront of their success. And I mean, these are conversations that in our world we're having every day. But do you feel like something changed or shifted maybe do you think that maybe we take the crisis and you try to find something good in it? And at least this is something that I've believed, is that it seems to me like people are taking communication more seriously. All of a sudden, communication has become tangible. It's become recognizable. People are working from home. And of course, the emphasis on who do I believe in, and what is the CDC saying? All of these things, it seems as if we are poised in a position now where scientific communication may be brought back into the limelight. And wow, what an opportunity to be exactly where you are, to say, I've been telling you all along this is important, and having some of these firms come back to you and say, Sophia, you're right, please help us.
Right. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. There is an interest and a demand for credible communications, especially as it comes from a scientific perspective. People want to know that the right people with the right credentials that actually know what they're talking about are now at the forefront, right? And because we have this limitation in transportation, it allows us to find new ways to communicate. And I think it opens the avenue for more frequent communication. We're on a video conference right now, right? And that maybe a year ago, there'll be a demand or natural interest in, let's meet in person. That was the gold standard for making connections. And I think the ease of communications that is facilitated by Skype, by Zoom, and other video conference providers have made it easier for that content to be shared. One of the reasons why I promote my podcast on YouTube, because podcasts used to be audio, but now it's like we want to see what they're wearing, we want to see their faces, all that good stuff. And I think that that's because of that natural interest again to connect. I think we are all looking for connectivity at this time. And there's also a need for credible content. And that's why the Sophia Consulting Firm for me could not have been established at a more important time. And a lot of the fears that I had initially about if I was doing the right thing has been diminished, reduced significantly. And I'm quite happy. And I think for you to be a leader of any organization, it starts first with self-mastery. How do you lead yourself? How do you find joy in yourself? And to have that conviction that there has to be something about you that is sort of making you punish yourself so much in this journey. And I think because I've identify what it is I'm supposed to do. There's a freedom that comes with it, but there's also an aha that comes with the universe resonating with the services you provide and the services that they need.
All right, so we could, and we will, we're going to have this conversation more often because you are making me feel very good about all the things that I'm doing right now. So I appreciate it. It's clear you are a born natural leader, Sophia. Every guest that comes on the show, I ask them one simple question that oftentimes takes us down a relatively interesting pathway. So the question is rather simple. What does communication mean to you right now?
I think it's about simplicity, right? And for me, because I specialize in scientific communications, it's about the duality between simplicity and complexity. So how do you take things that are very difficult to understand and make it easy and interesting for a large group of people to understand while still maintaining some level of credibility? So I think that communications is about taking often complex subject matter, simplifying it to a way that it's memorable and making it interesting. I think the interesting part is something that I demand of myself. It's not a requirement per se, but I think, communication involves exchange of information. And if you can make it interesting, then that exchange it's a lot easier and it's a lot more memorable. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I love it. I talk about these concepts all the time. Is it informative? Is it dynamic? Is it interesting? Because those are the things that matter. When you talk about complex ideas, it's not just the science that you've been working on, right? But even the way that we feel, our emotions and where we come from in our stories, those are very complex. And the better you are at expressing how you feel, the more likely you're going to get outcomes that you enjoy. I want to wrap on this point. You started the conversation today by saying that I had a significant influence on you as a student. But I would like you to know that if we don't have these folks to work with, if we don't have somebody that is willing to listen and to learn and to get better and strive and to push us, because in many of our early encounters, you would challenge and you would ask questions and you would say, why? You influenced me and you made me better, and you continue to make a lot of people in this world around you a lot better. And we're all grateful that you're here, and we're all grateful that you're doing what you can do. I'm going to end this conversation here, but this won't be the last time I think that we chat before this year is over. Sophia, thank you so much for joining me, for sharing your wisdom and insights. As we wrap up, if there's any way that we can stay in touch with you, or for anybody watching that wants to work with you, feel free to please share that information.
Yes, thank you for that. I appreciate your kind words. They say iron sharpens iron. So I think that that's a good thing that came out from our connection. My website is sophiaconsultingfirm.com. I think that that's the easiest way to communicate with me.
Awesome. Sophia, thank you so much. Stay well, stay healthy. Keep doing your thing. It's amazing. You brighten the world every day, and we'll talk again soon.
Same here. Thank you. I appreciate you, Rory.
Bye.
Bye.
Keep the conversation going, my friend. We're in this together through thick and